We also, and for those of you who don't know me as well, my name is Robert. I sit on the as chair of the coalition, and we have a awesome leadership team. And so we try to do our best to improve communication and collaboration with each other and community service providers to better reduce fragmentation among the community and how we provide that support. The coalition, its purpose and its mission is basically geared around planning, education, communication and advocacy, kind of what we already had spoken about. And so I'm super grateful for those of you who participate each month and represent your organization and willingness to dive in and learn and even voice your concerns and frustrations that are happening, because I know there's a lot of unrealistic expectations that a lot of people we work with have to meet in each system, and each system is different, and each system has their own regulations and organizational flows, and just it's a tough thing to navigate. So thank you again for being here. I do want to mention also the kind of the virtual etiquette and how this meeting is geared towards. So I will encourage everyone to mute your microphones, as we do have guest speakers. If you do have questions, to type them in the chat box, and I'll do my best to kind of facilitate those questions as we have each presenter kind of speaking on a different topic each month. This month we have the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance here to give us a little bit information about what they do. Something to look forward to again in our October months is reviewing the, we'll have speakers talking about the sit and lie ordinance and the no camping, and hopefully getting someone as well from the pod crew that goes around as well, who has interaction with a lot of our campers. So we're hoping to get someone from a representative from that team as well to speak at next month's meeting. Want to also mention about Spokane Homeless Coalition leadership elections. So we have the administrative and media liaison election kind of pushed towards December, just given the whole circumstances around COVID. But if there is, please, if there is any interest in the leadership positions here at the coalition, you can email myself or Barry in regards to that, to show your interest in maybe pursuing being elected as one of the leadership members. So that's all going to be coming up in December, and I'll continue to mention it each month as we go along to maybe get some interest that way. Let's see, what recently came out is the point in time count, and that was presented at the Continuum of Care meeting this month, and so or last month. So we're hoping to get either a recording or something to show those numbers and what that point in time count looks like here shortly, so you guys will have access. So stay tuned as far as what that's going to look like, as far as how that's going to become available to everyone. So I'm sure we'll be posting something about that shortly. And lastly, before we get on towards our guest speaker, is reflections and community collaboration. So one thing that we enjoy doing here is giving you guys a platform to share your voice and encouragement towards others in how you've been reducing fragmentation in the community, as far as how you've been utilizing each other and these services. So I like to leave the mic open at this point as a platform to give encouragement. If you feel uncomfortable speaking in front of, we have 63 participants. You can also put it in the chat box as well. But I'll leave the mic open now for any encouraging thoughts or collaboration moments that you had with someone in the community. And don't be shy. Don't be shy. I know it's a lot to speak. You guys, everyone does a lot of good work here in the community, and we just like to hear about it.
Come on, you're passionate about what you do. Share some of it.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Terry Anderson from the Tenants Union of Washington State. And during this time, we have found it really helpful to have a lot of collaborations, not only to address this horrific pandemic and how tenants are the same folks that are impacted by COVID. And so we are struggling with the economic impact and the health impact. So I just before this call got off the phone with Tony Allen from the Native Project. And we also have one of our clinics at the American Indian Community Center. And I really appreciate that collaboration so that we can really get the needs to the communities that are most hard hit and most impacted. We're also working with people in the Marshallese community so that they can get the assistance needed so that they can, have access to the resources that are available, and also the many other organizations that we have been forming coalitions with: Greater Spokane Progress, Spokane Low Income Housing Consortium, Spokane Alliance, Spokane Coalition of Color Against Racism, Asian Pacific Islander Coalition, and I'm sure I'm missing out many, Spokane NAACP, who are really urging the city to move forward with tenant protections. And also, thankfully, we're here to talk about legislative priorities, that these coalitions will also stay intact so that we can get the statewide protections that are needed for tenants right now. So I really do thank everybody that we have been having coalitions with, even though we're all working from home. And I also want to include the Spokane Homeless Coalition, because you guys are just awesome. And it's just a great network to be able to get information out and have individual members reach out to both Amber and I about clients and tenants. And so this is just all one big collaboration that I appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry. That's awesome. Yeah, it's amazing to see. I mean, if you're part of the email chain, I mean, there's a lot of emails that come through, but it's awesome to see the responses that you get when posts come up through that email chain, and to see that quick response when someone's looking for a specific resource to direct someone. It's amazing to see all of you kind of navigate that together. I want to give a shout out to the Spokane Regional Health District as well. They've assisted our clinic. So for those of you who don't know, I work at a Providence Charity Clinic, and we provide acute care needs for those experiencing homelessness. But we have kind of a partnership with the Spokane Regional Health District in situations where we need to test patients who may be experiencing symptoms of COVID, but the health district has kind of the isolation. They've been very good as far as the communication, just back and forth with their team in making that happen, so they'll have a safe environment to be in as test results come back, or just waiting and waiting to see what that looks like. So again, to the health district, thank you. And I'll leave it open for a couple more reflections.
I have one.
Go ahead.
I want to thank everybody, all of our service providers that are working to show up and help our people experiencing homelessness at the Monroe Service Center. This is our 4th week of running that on Sundays. We're seeing an average of 200 people a day each time we run that program, and they're able to access their services. So I appreciate all the providers that are showing up every Sunday and meeting with our houseless friends.
Great, thank you, Julie. I'll leave it open for one more before we dive in.
Robert, you might want to read the chat.
Okay, I'd like to just give a shout out to the coalition. I'm working on one with a single mother with 4 kids, 2 of which are special needs, victim of domestic violence, but difficult to get her in because she owed $5,800 and very old rental arrears. I'm happy to report that $5,800 has now been whittled down to we're hunting for the last $450. Couldn't have happened without the coalition either offering their individual support or pointing me in another program that could help. So if all goes well, we should have that wrapped up, I'm hoping by Friday afternoon, and then we can start going with the fun stuff, which is finding a place for her to rent.
Nice. Connie, thank you for that. And actually, if you look in the chat box, you have a little shout out from Jen Snow, just on your guys' teamwork together as well. So good job, everyone. Yeah, you're doing amazing things that tend to be overlooked. So that's why I love spending some time to reflect on what everyone's doing. So now I'm going to go ahead and switch gears over to our presenters for today. We have, let's see, John, and who's going to be talking about a lot of different things, I'm sure, but of what's going on with legislation and how we can get involved and things like that. So is John, are you on right now?
Yeah, I'm here. Michelle's probably going to be leading our portion, but I am here as well. So
okay, perfect. Michelle, so I'll hand the mic over to you. Can you give us a little description about kind of who you are, where you guys are located, what you do, all that information?
Yeah, and we actually have a PowerPoint. I'm not sure if Barry was going to show it this morning, or if you wanted to me to share my me have the ability to share my screen.
I am getting that up right now.
Okay, cool. So while you're getting that up, I'll introduce myself, and we have a couple of staff members from the Housing Alliance on today. So I'm Michelle Thomas with the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance. I know many of you are familiar with us. Terry, who spoke a little bit earlier, is on the board of our sister C4 organization, the Housing Alliance Action Fund. And we work closely with some of you, so it's nice to see some familiar faces and nice to see folks that we haven't met before. I'm the director of, gosh, what's my title? I can't remember. Policy.
Director of Policy and Advocacy, I think.
I've been here for 11 years. I can't remember my own title. Sorry, guys. Yeah, that's my title. And my pronouns are she, her. And before the Housing Alliance staff otherwise introduces themselves, one thing that's really helpful to us, if folks on Zoom, you can change the way your name shows. If you wouldn't mind putting in your pronouns so we don't get that wrong when we talk with you, and if you could put your organizations as well, or any organization that you're affiliated with, that would be helpful as well. John, do you want to fully introduce yourself?
Sure. So yeah, again, I'm John Stovall. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the member organizer with the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance. So I recognize many of your names and many of your faces from just working with you throughout the state. So glad to be here.
And Caroline and Mary, do you want to introduce yourselves as well?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Caroline Lopez. I'm the Director of Organizing for the Washington Housing Alliance, and I'm very happy to be here today. Go ahead, Mary.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. My name's Mary. I use she, they pronouns, and I'll be the Community Organizing Fellow with the Housing Action Fund this year.
All right, so thank you everybody for having us here today. So while we're waiting for the PowerPoint presentation to get up, I'll just go through our goals today. So this is part of our interim listening tour. So the Housing Alliance is really unique in our legislative work in that we inform our legislative priorities from communities across the state and from people experiencing homelessness, and from folks like you who are also working directly with people experiencing homelessness and housing instability. We get information from listening tours like this. Typically, they're in person, but obviously the world's a little different now. We also did a big survey with over 350 people answered, and I know many from Spokane did, so if any of you answered our survey, thank you. We cobbled together all of this information we get from many, many conversations and from our survey, and then we bring those results to our Public Policy Committee, which is comprised of members of the Housing Alliance who apply to be more integrally part of our agenda setting process. That committee meets through the summer and then makes a proposal to both of our boards of directors, and then our board of directors ratifies our public policy agenda. And then we do the hard work of working to pass those policy priorities. So this is part of the end leg of our listening tours. Our Public Policy Committee will be meeting in a couple of weeks and be then sending a proposal to our board of directors. So today, in addition to just giving you a little bit of context of some things we know about the upcoming legislative session, which starts in January, we wanted to talk a little bit about how to get more involved with the Housing Alliance on the advocacy front, because regardless of what we all decide today is important. If we don't advocate for it, it's not going to happen, right? So advocacy is more important than anything. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, but then mostly we're going to spend the time that we have with you going over the questions that Barry sent out to you several weeks back to get information from you on what the most pressing priorities are that you'd like to see addressed in the next legislative session. So this is just a timeline of our listening tour. It's similar to what I said. As you can see, the legislative session starts on January 11th, and it's a long one. It goes until April 26th. All right, so in terms of context setting, it's just important to know that today what we're talking about is state level policy. Local policies are critical. The state has a lot of control on what local jurisdictions are able to do. And federal policy is also really critical, but what we're talking about today is solely state level policy that the Washington State Legislature will have control over when they convene in January. When they convene in January, though, there's a couple of things we do know that is going to significantly influence their capacity and where a lot of the attention will be spent. I think, as you all know, we have a really significant budget deficit. Right now it's projected to be $8.8 billion. That could change. It could get worse. It could get better. We'll know closer to session when they do a new revenue forecast. But right now there is an $8.8 billion shortfall, meaning that the budget that the state is currently working from is lacking $8.8 billion. So when the legislature convenes in January, they're going to have to grapple with how to deal with that. And they will have some choices to make. You know, they could choose to enact new revenue to bring in more money to the state to cover that shortfall. If they did, we would hope that it was progressive revenue, meaning revenue that doesn't overly tax low-income folks. As you all know, Washington State has the most regressive tax system in the country, meaning the lowest income folks in Washington State pay the most. So when we say progressive revenue, we mean revenue that doesn't further do harm or doesn't further that regressive taxing system. Or they could choose to do an all cuts approach. So for example, they could cut that much from the government, from the state budget. If they did, that would significantly impact the programs that we all care about, because a lot of the budget is protected from cuts because it's constitutionally required. So the areas that they can cut from fall heavily on human services. And that includes the parts of the budget that fund the Housing and Essential Needs program that we were talking about a little bit earlier, and that you're seeing the great results of in your community. So I don't think the legislature and many of the leaders, both in the House and the Senate, Senator Billig, you're an incredible leader, and in the House, the leader is Speaker Jenkins. But you also have a really important lawmaker in Representative Ormsby. He's the head of the Budget Committee in the House. So the leadership around how what approach the leaders, the Democratic caucuses who have the majority will take I don't think there's an appetite at all for an all cuts approach, but enacting revenue that will cover such a significant shortfall is not easy to do either. And so I think there are questions about how it's going to play out and how we're going to protect against any cuts to really critical human services. We're lucky that at the time that this is occurring, that we have folks who care a lot about affordable housing and homelessness and human services leading the path. That's a really good position to be in, and it's much better than we were in during the Great Recession many years ago, when many, many deep cuts were made to programs that haven't been made up for yet. For example, TANF was cut during the Great Recession deeply, and we still haven't gotten TANF back to its pre-recession cut level. So that's just a big question, and it's going to take a lot of capacity and a lot of time in the legislature. So what that means is that it could impact capacity to pass really complicated, significant policy bills. It will definitely impact the ability to pass spending, bills that require spending. It will definitely impact the ability for the legislature to increase spending on critical programs. So that's just something to keep in mind as we talk about our priorities for 2021. And obviously too, the legislature hasn't yet decided on what they're going to do about COVID. You know, are we going to have a virtual session? Is it going to be partially virtual? If so, that will just impact the capacity of the legislature and of advocates to fully, you know, be there and really negotiate really complicated bills. So it's just something to keep in mind. A lot of organizations and lawmakers are recommending that we potentially scale back our expectations of the next legislative session because of the potential of it being virtual. That said, there are so many needs around affordable housing and homelessness and tenant protections. It's very hard to scale back. So we're sort of in the process of grappling with that. The information you give us today will help inform how our 2021 priorities shape up. And then of course, there's going to be a lot of new lawmakers. And this year, that's an exciting thing. We have the opportunity to elect incredible new housing champions across the state. If you're not already familiar with the Housing Action Fund, please just familiarize yourself with that. That's a C4 organization, so we're not going to talk about it today, but it is one where you can get involved in to elect housing champions, and that's really critical in ensuring that affordable housing and homelessness priorities advance. All right, so next slide, please. So I'm going to pass it over to John and Caroline to quickly review some advocacy opportunities, because like I said, no matter what we decide for 2021, if we don't advocate, it's not going to happen. So Caroline, do you want to talk about the Resident Action Project?
Yeah, there's actually so much to say, but I'm just going to say this in like 2 minutes. So the Resident Action Project, many of you know about this wonderful project that is a statewide network of people who are directly impacted by housing and homelessness, either currently or previously. And this is a resident-led project so that we can work through working through state and even now federal policy change through storytelling, organizing, civic action. And then we have several things that are happening right now. Specifically, in a couple of weeks, we will have our own RAP listening session on Wednesday, the 16th from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. So if you're interested, I'm going to put my email in the chat again. And we also offer a summit at the end of this month that offers leadership training for folks. So if you know folks who are impacted by these systems and are interested in doing more advocacy, policy work, and just learning about the work that we do, we would really love for them to come to this summit, and then also just email me. And then we are going to be working on voter registration as well. So that's really exciting to have folks who are impacted by these different systems to work towards the change that needs to happen. So that's all I will say for now, but please email me if you have any other questions or would like to have folks participate in the Resident Action Project. Thanks. John?
Yeah, all right. I'll jump in with a few more advocacy opportunities because, as Michelle said, it is the hard work and the very, very important work of what happens to get bills passed in Olympia. So So I want to just start off because there are so many ways to get involved. If you are at all interested in learning a little bit more about advocacy with the Housing Alliance or getting a little bit more involved in advocacy work, can you please just put that in the chat real quick? And I would love to follow up with any of you one-on-one after this meeting, because we really want to just hear from you today. So I don't want to take up too much time actually making connections. But if you're interested, please do put that in the chat. A couple things I want to mention actually. So right now, as Michelle said, COVID is a completely different environment, and normally the Housing Alliance would really be working primarily at the state level. And mostly today we'll be talking about the state level, but one thing we can't ignore is the fact that our federal government has to intervene and has to pass additional funding and policies to be able to protect people and keep them in their homes during COVID-19, or else we are literally going to see one of the worst housing crises as a result of a huge wave of evictions and homelessness that we've ever seen. So we've been really advocating at the federal level as well as the state level, and for the next, foreseeable future really, but definitely in the next couple of weeks, we absolutely need to be contacting our federal lawmakers, that's our members of Congress, to ask them to pass housing protections to keep people in their homes, which includes $100 billion for emergency rental assistance. It includes $11.5 billion for emergency solutions grants, so shelter funding, shelter services, homeless services, a lot of the work that you all are doing. I know on the ground you're seeing a huge need for that right now, as well as additional funding. So please take a second if you have, either during this call or afterwards, to click the link I just put in the chat there and send an email to your lawmakers about that. A couple other things, and I'll be really quickly. So Michelle was talking about progressive revenue and how we need to be able to prevent huge cuts in our state budget and also work to make our budget more fair and in a way that doesn't overburden people who are low income in our state. So enacting progressive revenue is the strategy that we need to take this year and in the future to be able to do those things. We have an opportunity at the Housing Alliance for you to take action today, especially if you are a board member of an organization or if you work closely with your board at the place where you work. So boards can actually pass a resolution within their board, and it's sort of on behalf of the organization, saying, our organization will prioritize pushing for progressive revenue this year and in the future. And I have a sample resolution, I have sample language. I've been going to different board meetings to sort of answer questions and help assist with that process. So if that's something that you think you might be interested in bringing to your board or bringing to your organization as a way to kind of push the envelope a little bit on progressive revenue, I would love to connect with you directly. And I'll also put a link in the chat about that and how you can connect with me. And finally, we have a more long-term role as an advocate with the Housing Alliance. And that's called our Legislative District Leads program. The goal here is to have at least one, but preferably 2 or 3 leads in every single legislative district around the state. So for you all, that would be the 3rd, the 4th, the 6th, and the 7th districts. And that person is there to kind of help build your base of advocates in your community around housing and homelessness, and to develop connections and relationships with your lawmakers, and to help kind of mobilize and get our bills passed during the session. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in getting involved with, I would also really, really love to connect with you on that. So I'll put a link to the page and description of the role in the chat here, and then you can take a look and see if that's something you'd like to do and reach out to me. So I don't want to take any more time, but I did want to just make those plugs, and I'm excited to connect with you all.
All right, so that means let's move on to the discussion questions, which thank you so much, Barry, are on the screen in front of you all. So you know what, one thing I would recommend is, like, let's copy and paste these questions into the chat. And we can take the discussion questions, we can take the slide off, because in the past presentations we've done by Zoom, I know that people like to actually see each other. So, okay, there we go. So what I'm gonna do instead is I will paste those in right now to the chat so everybody can see them. The first question though, I'll go ahead and take, and then John and Caroline will take the next one. So, and this is the type of question where, don't be shy. No answer is wrong. All answers are right. So please, everybody, feel compelled to participate. if you could ask for just one thing from state lawmakers, either just a policy bill or a spending need that would make a significant difference in reducing and preventing homelessness in your community, what would it be? And we're asking for just one thing intentionally. I know it's very hard to narrow down one thing because there are so many needs, but this is the types of things that we have to grapple with because we have to have a narrow agenda. And so we just like to hear from you. If like you really were forced to say the one thing, what would it be? And I see that folks are already putting it in the chat. So you can put stuff in the chat or you can feel free to unmute and speak.
Can I speak, please?
Please.
My name is Francis Adewale. I'm the former co-chair of Homeless Coalition. I'm happy to be here. I'm sorry that I was asked to introduce myself earlier on. Somebody texted me and said, you have been asked to introduce yourself. Where were you? I apologize to everyone, but I'm sorry. Now, for me, it is not about whether eviction is going on now. It is about what we're going to do to support people. The eviction is going on now. Do not believe. And yes, the governor has tried, and there is also a moratorium on eviction and everything. What we need is enforcement mechanism to stop such eviction. So if there is any one thing I would like our legislators to put some teeth on, it is about civil legal aid that supports keeping people in housing at this time. Yeah. And I think, you know, I'm glad that Marcus is here, and I wish other state legislators are here. And maybe it's something that the Homeless Coalition needs to put this in a form, in a paper that's that all of us are asking that we provide support for civil legal aid at this time, because there is going to be a floodgate, whether we like it or not, whether it's September ending, whether it's December ending, whether it's October ending, it's going to happen eventually, because there is no way. Because all we are doing is we are saying you don't have to pay your rent now, but you hold this rent, you're going to have to pay back again. So there is a need for us to have access to justice, and there is a need for us to argue, because these are going to disparately affect Blacks and indigenous communities and people of color in general. So we need a state legislator to be able to provide a form of enforcement mechanism that would guard against unlawful detainer action, that would help people to be able to access justice to keep them housed at this time. So for me, my request to the Homeless Coalition, and I don't think it's anything strange. We have done this in the past, is to put it in a letter form to the state legislators. We have even invited our state legislator in Eastern Washington to this forum and said, these are no-go area for us. You always talk about putting some money in a lockbox that you're going to use for a rainy fund. This is a rainy day for our state. This is a rainy day for our country. You cannot hold your hand. Every ideology that whether you are coming from the right or from the left, there is an acknowledgement of the fact that this is a natural cause incident that is not because somebody is spending money stupidly. This is a disaster that has come upon us due to COVID and to the racial injustice in our system. So for me, number one is civil legal aid. Do not cut civil legal aid in order to protect somebody or to protect another program, and also keep people housed. So that for me is a no-go area.
And what organization did you say you were from?
I'm with the community court in Spokane, and I wear so many hats. I'm also a community activist, and I'm former co-chair of this organization of Homeless Coalition. It's been a while now. Maurice is my partner during our time. We passed the baton on to everybody else.
Great, thank you so much. And I definitely agree on the importance of civil legal aid and ensuring that tenants have due process. Does anybody else have any other thoughts? There's a lot of participation in the chat, which we're capturing all of that too. So thank you. Does anybody else have anything else they want to speak to?
Hi, this is Terry from the Tenants Union.
Hey, Terry.
And I think I echo everything Francis just said. We're extremely concerned right now because even though there is a moratorium, there is a exception with a 60-day notice that those are really increasing right now. It's unclear whether or not landlords actually have to prove that they're selling their property or that they're moving in. I'm getting all kinds of confusing things on that, so that's really increasing right now, as well as the health and safety issue. I just got a call from a tenant this morning where every tenant in the building was served a notice saying that they're smokers and smoking is not allowed, and that the governor's moratorium allows landlords to evict on health and safety, and then gave this huge citation about secondhand smoke. And it's really just setting up, and this tenant doesn't even smoke. And so, and every tenant in the building got that. And so these are the kinds of things that are continuing to happen, even though we have a moratorium right now. So it's really scary for tenants when they get notices like that because they think they're getting evicted. I would like to see these protections made permanent, so even after the moratorium passes.
Terry, can I interrupt you? Your sound is really bad. Can you? I think you're having that problem with your speaker crackling. So I think folks are having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to take my video off because that always makes a difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
So much better.
Okay,
wait.
Is that better? Okay,
oh, no, I'm sorry.
I'd like to see,
do you want to
I'll put it in the chat. I'll put it in the chat.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Thanks, Terry. Sorry.
If I may, I'd like to follow up on Terry and on Francis. I posted in the chat just a couple minutes ago the thought that, you know, we're about to, the number I saw this yesterday evening on the news was $100 million in rent arrears assistance is going to be coming into the system.
Yeah.
My question is there any way we can establish some kind of quid pro quo between the tenants and the landlords? If the tenant's going to get the landlord's rent caught up, if the landlord agrees not to evict that person, if they get caught up 3 months, then for the next 3 months, they're not going to be evicted except for the standard reasons of safety or they didn't pay the next month's rent.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that could actually absolutely happen, Maurice. And in fact, that's how King County is managing their funds that they've received from the ERAP program, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. They are requiring landlords to sign a document attesting to not evicting the tenant. So,
well, I figured it was an original idea, but
it's a great idea.
I'd love to see it implemented here in Spokane County at some level, so that there's that's what collaboration and community are all about.
Who in Spokane is administering those funds and making the decisions? Do you know?
I do not know, but I'm sure somewhere on this list is a person in the know.
So that's Spokane County?
It is, okay.
Yes, and there has been conversations, and that's with the COVID Racial Equity Task Force, because the commerce funds that go to the county have to have racial equity impact, and I'm not sure the county would do that if we didn't have a collaboration to push them on it. So we're still working on that. It's very frustrating in Spokane County.
I have a question.
Please, go ahead, Julie.
What is being done for the homeless in our community? They're evicted from their shelter in place daily. And if we think evictions aren't happening, they are regularly. And the increase of people experiencing homelessness on the streets right now is overcapacitating every one of our neighborhoods because of people getting evicted during the eviction moratorium. There's still lots and lots and lots of folks with evictions. Who do they contact besides the tenants union? Because they have to have a place to go. Homeless people don't have access to internet. They don't have access to phones. They don't have access to those things. And there isn't a general place where they can access answers for their questions.
Yeah. So first of all, the eviction moratorium actually does apply to homeless shelters. And so people should not be being evicted from a shelter.
They are every day, every day.
Every single
Is it the same
day
shelter
of
that's
the
doing
week.
that, or is it multiple ones?
The official city position, maybe there's someone from the city on the chat today, but the official city position is that as long as there is one open shelter bed anywhere in the city, they can enforce no camping and sit and lie. And they're going through and sweeping homeless people out of all the parks. It
happened on
daily.
Tuesday, our entire city got swept, and
wow.
all the homeless people sleeping in their tents, even with shelter in place signs. It doesn't matter. We just want to know where to send these folks, because one shelter bed available, there was 10 shelter beds available in our city last night, and we served 600 meals to unsheltered folks in our city.
Wow.
I think this is a good reminder just to pop in here that, you know, for our statewide organizations, that Spokane is not Seattle, and we're just a different operating environment out here.
Mm-hmm. Well, sweeps are happening in Seattle too. They're happening all over the state. So the eviction moratorium explicitly doesn't allow shelters, structural shelters, to evict people, but what you're talking about is sweeps. And there was, the original proclamation actually did prevent sweeps, but it's been interpreted to be much more narrow. But I do encourage you to contact the Attorney General's office to see what their current position is on sweeps. It's nuanced, and so it kind of can depend on the circumstances. So I put the information in the chat on how to contact the Attorney General's office to ask questions or to file complaints about anything that might be a violation of the eviction moratorium. But, you know, this is an ongoing issue. And like I said, it's happening totally across the state, even in Seattle, in King County, all over. And it's a question that the legislature has brought up in recent years. Representative Gregerson and Representative Tai, who are both from Western Washington, have had introduced a bill several years back called the Homeless Bill of Rights, in which there was a conversation about, you know, preventing jurisdictions, both counties and cities, from violating the civil rights of people experiencing homelessness, and fully putting into statute the Martin v. Boise Ninth Circuit Court decision, which prevents local jurisdictions from sweeping, from making people move, from arresting people because they're trying to survive outdoors because they don't have a home. And so that is something that is fraught, unfortunately, because the cities and the counties association, you know, individual cities have different opinions on it and have different actions, but the associations at the state level were very oppositional, as was the Sheriff's Association. So it's not an easy conversation before the legislature, because there's entities that have a lot of access and sway that made it very hard to pursue that. But it's something that I know is going to be an ongoing conversation. Whether or not there's legislation introduced this year, I can't say, but there have been a lot of leadership from key lawmakers in the background working on this, and they continue to discuss it. But in the meantime, please do continue to share what's going on in your communities with us, because that's critical, and we'll keep you informed if there's if that conversation continues to advance. And do contact the Attorney General's office. And that's true of anybody who's also working with renters who are getting any types of eviction notices right now during the moratorium. So let's move on to the next question, because we're running low on time. So the next question Caroline's going to take, and Caroline, I'll go ahead and put it in the chat for you if you want to jump in here.
Okay, I actually already had it
Oh, great.
So it is in the chat. The next question, and we touched upon this in the last question as well, but what racial disparities related to housing and homelessness are experienced in your community? And what other disparities are experienced by disability, LGBTQ+ status, and age, citizenship status? Just knowing that there are disparities, you know, with intersectional issues as well. And if anybody would like to jump in. And you can also write some things in chat.
Hi, this is Terry from the Tenants Union again. We actually have been looking at the statistics in Spokane, and the racial divide in home ownership in Spokane is wider than the state and the nation. So it's about 70% of white households are homeowners, and about 70% of people of color households are renters. And so the fact that we have a near zero vacancy rate, we have absolutely no tenant protections beyond the Residential Landlord Tenant Act, that is a disparity that puts people of color in a less stable and less secure housing because laws don't protect them as the same way that homeowners are protected. That alone, it creates all of our problems, I think. But then, you know, then you can add all the other issues in terms of, I think our racial divide in homeownership creates even a greater racial equity issue in Spokane.
Thank you, Terry. Can I add to that? Caroline, is that okay? Can I add to that?
Please, yeah.
Okay. The other aspects of the problem that also magnifies the disparity is because the CARES Act expressly exclude people with convicted felony history. It expressly excludes so-called felon. We call them justice-involved people, but that CARES Act expressly excludes a lot of people that look like me that have a criminal conviction of a felony nature on their history. In other words, while since March, some of us on this call have been able to have access to tax refund, tax rebates, and opportunities in the CARES Act to be able to keep our housing, to pay for things, majority Black, that's due to the drug enforcement of the 80s and 90s, have a felony conviction or their history, cannot access the same opportunity that many of us on this call have. That is a distinctly federal problem, and if you're going to be doing outreach to the federal legislators, that is an injustice, because more Black people are in jail in the United States than any other country in the world. And because of drug enforcement, the crazy drug enforcement laws of the 80s and the 90s. Now, that is where we find ourselves. And now to expressly exclude those people that are hardworking, that are trying to get back on their feet, to exclude them from the CARES Act and throw their family into problem when nobody was able to work and many people were laid off, is an injustice of the highest proportion. And it adds to the homeless population that we have in our county and in our states. That is something that you should bring up with our federal legislators. This is not a problem from Tim Obsby or Marco Riselli, because our state actually was a lot more amenable to that. But the federal legislation was an injustice of the highest order. Thank you.
Absolutely. And of course, both of those on top, having felony conviction and having an eviction, it makes it even harder to get housing again, like just exacerbated. Thank you, Francis. Does anyone else like to speak up on this question? And we're also taking everything from the chat and we're copying off everything from the chat.
I think that it's important to add that landlords in Spokane are predominantly white and tenants are not. And the imbalance of power between tenants and landlords create Just like what Julie was saying about people being evicted, I'm hearing that too, but when I call the courts, there's like very few evictions that are being filed. And so why are people telling people they're being evicted? Because they feel like they've been evicted. Either their landlord has told them something, and that imbalance of power does not allow the tenant to question that or to find out what really may have happened, and then they act on it, and then they leave their homes and become homeless. That is a huge problem in Spokane.
Thank you so much.
It really is the imbalance of power. That's where we're seeing the biggest turnover in the evictions that are still happening. If you understand the population that are getting evicted, they are very grateful for the housing that they do have. And when somebody with a position of power over them tells them that they are evicted, even though it doesn't go through the legal channels, when that's your only option to leave, you leave. And we're seeing it giant in our elderly population. We're seeing it in our houseless or formerly houseless population, but it is widespread throughout our county, whether or not people are homeless or were currently homeless or formerly homeless. It's not just them that are suffering, but they are our next wave of homeless population coming through, and we are unprepared for the sheer numbers of it.
I also think it's important to say that those problems are exacerbated when you discuss the intersectionality. So people of color who are LGBTQ or who have disabilities, those issues become even more intensified.
Absolutely. Okay. Shall we move on to the next question? And then, you know, if something else comes up, you're always welcome to add more to the chat. And even after the next question or during the next question, if something else comes up, please feel free to go ahead and come back to the question that is really speaking to you. So thank you so much, John.
Oh, first of all, like, how are we doing on time, Barry or anybody? Do we have time for this last question?
Yeah, we have time to continue to go on to the next question. And also, you know, we've allowed a little extra time post the meeting. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time, that if you do need to leave at 10:30, that's okay. We'll continue to record this, and so if you want to be informed of the further discussions on how on what's going on, then they can access that on our website.
Okay, great, thanks. So our third question here is, what is the most pressing housing or homelessness issue in your community? So a little similar to the first one, but also, you know, you all have said a lot of really great things already that may sort of get at this question. It is totally cool to reiterate something you've already said, but this is also an opportunity to really think about, like, you know, what is the number one issue that you would feel like you need to prioritize if you could pick one? I'm seeing from Eileen a lack of housing, I'm assuming. I would agree with that.
I think we would all agree that we need more housing. No question about it.
Raised her hand.
But,
Affordable housing specifically, yep.
The other need in the short run, because housing, that's not going to get solved today, this year, or the solution may be a couple years out. I mean, let's be realistic. We need more shelter bed space. We only have 648 beds for a confirmed point in time count population of 1,559. And so 58% of people experiencing homelessness in Spokane couldn't get into a shelter or get a bed, a bath, a meal, or any of the things that come with it. There's 58% of those on the street can't access that. So the immediate need, in addition to more housing, is more shelter space, to at least give them a place to get off the street and out of the parks and off the sidewalks and out of the alleys into a low barrier place where they can be safe, they can recover, they can access services, and maybe start taking that next step that's going to eventually get them into permanent housing. So right now we are desperately short of shelter space.
Maurice,
Low
can I ask a
barrier
follow-
shelter space.
I heard low barrier shelter space. Thank
Yes.
you. Just a follow-up question. Maurice, have you seen, like how has COVID impacted your shelter capacity locally? Has it resulted in a decrease or?
Yeah, they're all numbers from the city. Are that in January, pre-COVID, we had 805 available shelter beds in the citywide system. Today, that number is 648. It was down to about 634. So we have lost effectively almost 300 beds, or let's call it 250 beds. The bottom line is, yeah, we're hurting. And COVID has had a profound impact. And we're the outreach workers that I try to talk to on a regular basis, is that they are seeing an increased number of homeless people that they have never seen before. And I got that in an email from a caseworker at Catholic Charities this morning, saying I'm sad to see the number of homeless people on my drive to work, people I have never seen before. And so that's anecdotal, but if you're a caseworker or an outreach worker, it's a very true anecdote.
To give you a perspective on that, we send referrals to anybody who provides housing. We provided 87 new referrals in the last month of new people experiencing homelessness, people who've never entered our system, people who are just currently homeless during COVID. And that's a gigantic increase to the 5 or 10 that we were doing pre-COVID.
Wow, that's a huge increase.
And Julie, what organization are you from?
We're Jules Helping Hands. We provide street outreach 7 days a week on the street. So we see and pride ourselves on knowing most homeless people in our county. And up until COVID, we did have a relationship with most of the folks we meet. We're seeing at least a 10 times increase. We provide shower locations at 6 locations throughout our city. We're seeing a gigantic increases in those populations as well, of just people with no access to anything. They have everything's closed during COVID. Mental health, drug treatment, there's very few options available, and people are sinking deeper into despair. We're struggling to come upon a camp that is okay. In the last few months, the people out on the street are struggling at a disproportionate rate to the housed community just because of lack of services.
And this is Joan Medina with Camp Hope and Bridget's Cloak. And I would emphasize that with the lack of services, hygiene is at the top of the list. We don't have 24/7 public toilets, except for very few porta potties, and they are not regularly serviced. I saw pictures just like a week ago of porta potties that were overflowing because they had not been serviced. So there are teams that go out, like Jules goes out and cleans the porta potties, but they can't empty them. Only the companies that are, providing those porta potties can empty those. So toilets, not to mention hand washing stations or showers or any other hygiene kind of service is just simply not available to people on the street here in Spokane.
Showers are the biggest thing that we're seeing right now. There is only 3 shelters that have showers available, and a couple of other nonprofits that can do 1 or 2 showers weekly. Other than that, there is no free shower in our county for people unsheltered, which means people are going weeks without showers, and the body lice outbreaks in shelters and in and people unsheltered is a gigantic health risk. and it's happening as we speak.
Thank you all. I'm seeing a lot in the chat as well. So I'll just lift up a couple of things in the chat here. So just cause protections, tenant protections, canceling rent and mortgages. I'm seeing mental health services, coordination of services, barriers that keep people from getting the help they need, focusing on outer areas versus just the city of Spokane. In Spokane Valley, there really isn't anything out there. Seen a number of new veterans that have moved from outside the area, from large metro areas. Also, Dale mentioned the amount of people living in their cars has increased. It's important to note. And then
Well, newly homeless people still have access to items. They still have their cars. They still have their storage units. That will all end eventually for them. But that's one thing that needs to be addressed, is those folks that are in cars still haven't reached the streets yet. And there's nowhere for them to go. With them being criminalized, their cars being towed, no place for them to sleep, then they're getting a criminal barrier on top of losing their vehicle to being towed.
This might be the one question that allows me to speak to something that's pretty grave. It's hard to imagine an increasing stigmatization of our homeless population, but we appear to be doubling down, and there appears to be an increase in a sentiment that just devalues those people. You'll have to move it along. There's more whack-a-mole. There's more, you got to get off my stoop. You got to move it along, by the police, but also by the public at large. And I don't know how to speak to this, but it's pretty horrifying in its impacts. And that of its own, we've won the heart and minds of the public about those people and the ills that beset them. And everyone knows there's nothing you can do about those things. And we all have to admit, these are just the same problems that are the American disease. They're in every family, in every group gathered of humans in our country. It's the same problem sets, yet we demonize those people unhoused in ways that's just terribly damaging on top of everything else we've been discussing.
Hey, Ken, this is Joe Sands, and I just kind of wanted to echo your sentiment from the other side of the community, and I made some notes here, and I think high on my list is community education. You know, I think most of us feel like it's not me, I'm not the cause of this problem, I don't have, you know, rental properties, I support homeless, I support the less fortunate, I support my efforts through my grocery store, I do all the things that, you know, I think I should be doing to help relieve this, and it's not changing, you know. And I think for me, you know, graphical visual information, you know, specific targeted messages, what's this, you know, specific problem, what's some specific solutions, what can we do as a community, how, you know, if it's a money thing, how much can I donate to, you know, to some chart or something. You know, you go down and you see the boots for the fire, you know, the firefighters. You see where we are on this, you know, this drive to, you know, raise some money. And I don't know if we can do it at this point in time right now, but down the road, those are the kind of targeted messages and things I think we need to do as a community to help lift up, you know, our fellow man and those that are less fortunate and are impacted right now.
There's so much going on in the city to try and hide the existence of people who are homeless. It's like if we don't see them, they don't exist and they're not a problem. And there's so much fear that if someone sees a homeless person or is asked, you know, for change, by a panhandler that that's going to drive away business or destroy the community somehow. And so it seems to me like the city is doing everything they can to hide the fact that homeless people exist in this town. And it's interesting that you brought up the firefighters boots campaign, because I remember a handful of years ago there was a huge push to try to make panhandling illegal in Spokane. And when it was realized, oh, the firefighters are panhandling with their boots campaign, you know, and the Guild School is panhandling with their pennies campaign, then, you know, exceptions were made for those programs to panhandle, but then they made it illegal to panhandle within the downtown core and along the freeway ramps for anyone else. And they disguised it as a public safety measure, you know, that people shouldn't be reaching across that barrier from the sidewalk into the street because they could get injured. And so it was disguised as a public safety measure, but really what it was a campaign to try to eliminate panhandling downtown. And that's just one example of how this town tries to hide the fact that homeless people exist here in our community. And I think it's shameful.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Thank you all for sharing that. I also saw from somebody that rent deposit assistance, so people can move into housing, that those chunks of move-in costs can be really expensive and it's really hard to get into to housing for folks. I will also add, we passed a bill this last year, House Bill 1694, which didn't put a cap on the amount of move-in costs that can be asked for at the beginning of a tenancy, but it did provide the option for a tenant to request a 3-month installment payment plan for those move-in costs. And it also put a limit on holding fees as well. So that at least breaks up the amount of money per month that a person has to come up with in order to move in at the beginning. Doesn't solve the underlying issue of, you know, landlords charging several times the monthly rent to be able just to move in at the beginning. But I hear you on that for sure.
One thing I would like to say is, and I want to give credit to the Washington State Low-Income Housing Alliance for a legislation that allows a councilmatic approval for housing levy, and instead of having it go to a vote, which is something that is being talked about in the city of Spokane. And my understanding is that if there is funding that's created through this levy, that some of those funds could actually go for eviction prevention or homelessness prevention that are not being able to, like HUD funds can't be used for. So if anybody that's on this call wants to have some input, I would suggest you contact the city council or contact I think Melissa Morrison with the city of Spokane is coordinating all of these meetings and efforts leading up to the vote to get more housing. But I know that as important as housing is, we also need funding for other things. And that would be like rental assistance is something that Spokane has never provided. And we have tenants that lose a cell phone. They need their cell phone for their job. If they have to pay to replace it, they're not able to pay their rent and they can be evicted. It seems to me we should have pots of money to help tenants through these temporary shortcomings that happen. Your car breaks down. I mean, that is how tight it is right now. Rent has increased in Spokane 45% in the last 5 years. And so I know this isn't what you're talking about, but I want to give credit because if it wasn't for you guys, we probably wouldn't even be able to have a housing levy. So, but I think people should know that's upcoming in the city and that we should talk about what that money could be used for.
Thanks, Terry. Are there any other final, maybe it's probably time for us to wrap up, but are there any other final comments? This is really, really good. You all have raised a lot of issues, and you all have very detailed examples of why they're important. And I personally am really appreciative of all of you today sharing everything with us.
Any other closing comments from the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance?
Just want to thank you. We've done a lot of these throughout the summer, and this is one of the most robust, informative sessions we've had. I appreciate all the participation. I know many of you didn't get to speak, and so if you do have other things you want to say, we'll put our contact information is on the screen. Feel free to reach out to all of us or any one of us to follow up. We will stay in contact with you about how our agenda shapes up. And we invite you to get involved, to stay active, both in the advocacy needed before the legislative session starts and throughout the legislative session. So please do stay in touch, and please do take action on the federal level like John was talking about. It's really, really critical that we get the federal government participating in the solutions. Thank you, everybody. You're doing amazing work. Keep it up, and just thank you so much for having us here today.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much for your willingness to participate in our coalition. And you know, we look forward to kind of see what you guys come up with, what you come up with next. One thing I do want to mention is that again, that our next one will be October 1st, and that will be in regards to the no sit and lie and no camping. And hopefully, again, we can get someone from the pod team to be able to speak. We're working on that as well. The point in time count information should be available here shortly, so keep an eye out for that in the email chain. So you can kind of look at the numbers. And again, you know, the point in time count is a snapshot of one particular day out of the year. But it is helpful, especially with everything that's going on now. And I think there was an email sent out that the Homeless Connect will be pushed until spring. So keep looking for that information as well if you're wanting to participate in that as well. And then other than that, that's all we have for today. The meeting will remain open for any further discussion or announcements that you want to give in regards to your organization. We used to do that when we were meeting live, but we want to continue to utilize this time as a platform to make any announcements. But as of that, I will leave it up to Barry to close out the meeting when that's all said and done with. So again, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing everyone in October.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Low Income Housing Alliance folks. So if you have announcements and you want to say them out loud, just jump in and I'll acknowledge you, or you can put it in chat. Or if you have something other than announcement, but just want to continue the conversation, I'll just stay around as long as people want to do it.
Hey, this is Seth Hackenberg with the Spokane Community Court. Just want to let everyone know on October 5th, we'll be launching our community court in the East Central neighborhood. It'll be at the Martin Luther King Jr. Center. So from October 5th on, the first and third Mondays of every month will be at the MLK Center. The second and fourth Mondays of every month will be at the Northeast Community Center like we are now. And that time frame will still be from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m.
And when is the one downtown at the City Hall?
The one downtown is Tuesday in the City Hall Council Chambers, again, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Right now, we generally are open to the general public. However, right now with the COVID restrictions, we're only open to participants that are involved directly with the court. As soon as the COVID restrictions are lifted and we can have larger groups, we'll be open back up to the public.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I know there's everybody else. Go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, so our street outreach team, Ilza and Sabrina at Chaz, has actually been mobilized with hotspots and iPads to do some census outreach, and they started last week, and they already worked with 21 folks to get them signed up. And as everybody knows, that's critical for federal funding for so many different reasons, and that the timeline has really been, they were expecting an end of October, but has been reduced. Part of it part of it is people can use even street corners in the census. It allows them to do that, parks, etc. So I guess I would also say if anybody has some ideas of where Ilsa and Sabrina, like we could work with them, but we have mobilized folks because we're trying to count everyone. That's the purpose of the census.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. This meeting has been recorded, and within a few days it will be up on the Spokane Homeless Coalition website, so you can access it. I will also capture the file of the chat, and I don't know if I want to say. I'll try to. I'm not sure. I'll send that out to everyone, or if I'll just post it on the website. Because I'm not sure how much interest there is, but we'll capture all the chat stuff. If you definitely want a copy of it, just email me, barrybarfield@gmail.com, and I can send you the chat info. Anybody else? What else?
I would just real quick, for those who remain, we got about 35 people left on the chat. Again, if you are working with individuals who have been swept up in one of the police sweeps or has been cited under no camping or sit and lie, let's say within the past 6 months, I would like to connect with those folks and see if they'd be willing to go on camera in our documentary, which will be entitled "And Justice for Some," where we're going to examine homelessness in the legal system. And so I would like to get some very clean interviews with folks who have had entanglements of a legal kind, whether it's through the community court or however it's happened, caught up in the sit and lie sweep. I'd like to connect with those folks. And my email is real easy, risingrivermedia@gmail.com. Send me an email, and I would like to connect with those people, see if we can get their stories on film as part of the documentary. I really appreciate your help.
Yeah, Maurice is doing what I think it was Sam who suggested, community education. That's trying to educate our wider community of the condition. So Maurice is...
But we live in a generation that listens with their eyes and thinks with their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
What they see is their reality. And so we have to get better at our storytelling, telling true stories of people who were struggling, who've been swept up, how long they've been homeless. We've got to be better storytellers, and we need to be able to present an optic that engages with people so that they understand what is really going on in the homeless community, because most of our citizens don't know. We know because we're all policy wonks. The average person out there, all they know is the panhandler on the street corner, or the guy sleeping in somebody's business doorway, or the train wreck that showed up on the news involving homeless people. And we need to change some of that. So I would appreciate any contribution that you folks are willing to make.
Maurice, do we have media people attending this meeting?
I do not know. Generally, they don't. They're out chasing man bites dog stories, and so we're low on the priority list until we have a man bites dog story that we can send their way. That's why we send out.
Do we know if they get an invitation?
Mainly our invitations are up through the Google, our Google list, which is like 1,100 of folks like us.
Right.
That's not a bad idea. Does anyone out there have a distribution list for media? If you do, I'll check with my leadership team, make sure that's okay. But I think
I have a working list that I can share. I just collect names and emails over periods of time and throw them into a media list.
Okay.
And so I do have a list that I send press releases out to.
Okay,
We can talk about that later.
I'll bring that to the leadership team if we want to put all of us out there for to invite media to come watch.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
So Maurice, I wanted to tell you one of the patterns of the stories that I've come across is that when people are congregating in public spaces, they might be standing on the sidewalk, just hanging out and smoking, or they might be sitting on some green space under a shade on the lawn in that easement between the sidewalk and the street, which is public space. It's not, personal business property. They get hassled. They get threatened by the police if the police are called and show up. And there are certain areas where the police are being called to and they're showing up. And just the threat that the police might search them or ask for their ID, even though they're not doing anything illegal, just the idea that that might happen to them makes them just move along, because they don't want to be searched because maybe they have contraband, or maybe, you know, they have an outstanding warrant or something because they didn't show up for community court. And so the police use that tactic to hassle and move people along without actually arresting or citing anyone. And so there are, I am sure, thousands of instances where this has happened to people, but there's no record of it. They can't
there's no
prove
record
that
of it, but it's still
happened.
it's illegal to do that under the grant, under the Blake versus Grants Pass decision, which is about 30 days old in federal court in Oregon.
Right. And
They
you know that,
specifically refer to those kinds of practices of intimidating people and telling them to move on. And the court asked the question, where you want them, that's not a solution. And so those are some of the things that we want to focus on. But the way it's better for the viewing public to hear it from them than for them to hear it from me. And that's why we need real stories of people who have been through that, so that people understand these are real people. Yes, they have real lives, and they have real issues and real problems, but they are our community neighbors, they're our partners, they're our fellow citizens, and we need to find a way to treat them better than this.
But how can we get the word to people that, you know, that they have rights and that what the police are doing is illegal? I mean, because people are scared. They don't want to get caught with their contraband or whatever.
Can I jump in? Is that possible?
Yes, go ahead, Jennifer.
So my suggestion is twofold. The first thing is, as you point out, a lot of the people who are homeless might have contraband. They might have active warrants. They may not even know they have active warrants. They just know they don't want to, you know, have any sort of contact with police, because contact with police is potentially dangerous for them. So the first thing is, I don't think it's going to be effective or even advisable to say to them, well, you know, you should just tell the police that what they're doing is illegal, because even if it is illegal in that particular moment, it's not going to help any of our clients. It's not going to help any of the people that we're trying to serve, because they're just going to then have a more basically the police are not going to be kind in those circumstances. If they're ever kind, it's just going to go from bad to worse. I think that we can tell people you do have rights, but the suggestion should be something along the lines of, you know, you really need to then, if this is happening, then you need to report it to someone who can actually make a difference. And the Northwest Justice Project is a great resource for people. You can also send those people down to community court. If they're not cited, there's nothing that we can do directly, because we only deal with people who have been criminally cited. However, we deal with people who have been criminally cited. We see the results of the unlawful camping sweeps. We see the results of the sit and lie sweeps. So one of the things that we can do is that we can file challenges to those ordinances, challenges to the way that they're being enforced, and we can start to get into some of those uncited activities as well. So, I mean, I love the idea of empowering people, but I don't want to empower people and then get them like arrested for obstructing or something like that. That's not going to help them.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, if you want to set something up where you send out, you know, people who maybe look like they're homeless but aren't, and are activists and are willing to put their own personal safety at risk to make a point, then fantastic, that's great. But the people who are homeless are already so vulnerable. I don't want to put them in any greater trouble or danger from police contact.
And the person speaking is Jennifer, who's a deputy public defender in community court, so she knows of what she speaks.
Yes, I do.
Hey, Jennifer, I'd
love to connect
that
with you.
happens. We just proved that it is, those laws are specific to people experiencing homelessness this weekend, because we slept outside in Riverfront Park on the sidewalk with 5 people experiencing homelessness and my team, and not one law enforcement official, not one security, not one person bothered us because we were there.
Okay.
That is not the case if I was not there with our people experiencing homelessness. This law, and people don't realize in our city, just not homeless service providers, but the general public do not realize that these laws are specific and only for people experiencing homelessness.
Trust me when I tell you that I'm entirely aware of that. However, now that I know that you did that, I will send you an email, Julie. Let's talk outside of the meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Now, while I really think that the media presentation Maurice is talking about is a very powerful tool. And I will try to find people who have experienced this sort of, especially the whack-a-mole game. Everybody gets to move it along. That's supported by police or just local business owners. But the voice I heard of the woman who's sounds like a representative of the clients in community court. I want to speak to this community court. I think it, on the whole, reinforces the dehumanization, the sub-citizenship of people who are experiencing homelessness. You're shunted into this area where only people experiencing homelessness are shunted, with laws that are directed at just people who won't be using these beds that aren't available, that allow the laws to be enforced. I mean, on its face, this is a discriminatory set of laws. And then you're put in a position where if you miss a Monday appointment, you get a real failure to appear charge that can result in searching and whatever criminal problem that emerges with searching based on a legitimate searching based on a warrant down the road. And I talked to people in the community court down at the library. I went through 30 people and found 2 who could tell me, when I said, where do I plead not guilty? Where do I plead not guilty? There are only 2 people who could explain that you waive that right, that you plead guilty and waive the right. And everybody.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt because
yes, ma'am.
I am an attorney.
Yes, ma'am.
And I have been working in community court for over a year now. We speak to every single person individually. Community court is opt-in. You don't have to be in community court. It is a choice. If you don't want to be in community court, we send your case back to the regular court, and then you have the same options as any other criminal defendant there. But I would really recommend that you speak to Francis Adewale. I'll put his email in the chat. He knows, Francis is the godfather of community court. He is the father of community court. He created community court, and he can explain to you what the philosophy is in a way that probably I can't even do, but we talk to each person individually. So if they choose to be there, they choose to be there. And having worked as a public defender for 13 and a half years, I have to say that if your choices are between regular court and community court, then you're certainly, do you think it's more dehumanizing to be in community court? Because I don't see people getting better results in the regular court. I see people getting, generally speaking, worse results with few exceptions. And if I think they can get a better deal in regular court, then I advise them to go there. The other thing that we do is we do challenge probable cause. We also challenge the constitutionality of these statutes, but you also have to understand that I have challenged the constitutionality of these statutes and I have lost. So it's not that we haven't tried, it is that we have lost.
I believe this.
Thank you, Jen.
And that is the plight of being a public defender. You lose most of the time, even when you're right.
Thank you, Jen.
Oh, good. Francis is here.
You're too kind in what you said about me, but I just need. Is it Ken? I need Ken to understand that 7 years ago we decided to create community court because homeless people were serving a life sentence 20, 30 days at a time. They were constantly being put in jail in the regular court. And they would serve, they would not show up for court, they would get a warrant, they would be arrested under the bridge, they would go to jail, and then or they were arrested at 7-Eleven for taking a bite of an apple that cost 5 cents, and they serve a sentence of 30 days in jail that costs $130 per day to keep people in jail. They were doing that over and over and over again. So Judge Logan and a couple of us get together and we said, we need to put a stop to this madness. And we can't stop, we don't make the law. The city made the law that you cannot sleep under the bridge. If they take that law off the book, great. I wouldn't mind. I don't want to represent people that are sleeping under the bridge if I don't have to. But if the city want to lock people up, my job as a public defender is to stop that. So one of the things we did to stop that is to create a community court where you can come with your ticket, and if you so choose, whatever we want to get to the root cause of the problem. If your problem is that you just like the lifestyle of living free and die, probably a community court will not help you. So you have a right to be able to choose to go back to the other court, and you keep going back over and over again like the old system. But if you are looking for housing, we partner with Homeless Coalition, we partner with everybody. That's how I became the co-chair of Homeless Coalition, because I added to my job, not just representing people one case at a time, but the idea is I want to get to the root cause of the problem. If housing is the problem, if drug and alcohol problem is the issue, I want to get partners on the table that will help people. So when you came, probably you spoke to the wrong type of people, because nobody takes your right. The community court actually wrote in their policy that we have to respect your constitutional right to choose whether to be in court or not to be in court. So we've spent too much time on this, but you have my email. You could always get in touch with me. We are starting a new court at East Central Community Center that is targeted towards poverty alleviation. In other words, when you are cited by the police, instead of going to jail, we want to help you get your benefit. You know, if you take a bite of an apple that costs 5 cents, why should you spend 30 days in jail? You are costing the city of this city more money to keep you in jail than for us to provide the services for you. So that is where we come to this issue. And I hope to have more dialogue with you. If you can come down to the City Hall on Tuesday or to Northeast Community Center on Monday, I'll be there to talk to you more about this issue.
Very good. Yes, sir. I'd like that very much.
Thank you.
I have something that I just want to share with you that I think people need to hear. It's a very quick story. So I did the late night homeless outreach for about 6 or 7 years. And the story is one that I heard over and over again. And I think it'll shed some clarity maybe on the feelings of the people on the street about, some of the people on the street about community court. So this particular individual that I'm thinking of was sick, and he was telling me that he'd missed his community service hours, and he was going to have to show back up in community court to explain why he had missed his service hours. And he told me that if he had understood the ramifications of what he agreed to do with community court, he would have rather have spent the 2 or 3 nights in jail as his punishment and had just gotten it over and done with than have his 30 hours of community service, which was dragging on and on and on for months for him. And so
the maximum punishment for trespass is 90 days in jail, not 2 or 3 days in jail.
Right,
So,
but apparently in his situation, he was told that he would have to serve. He was told by the judge that he would have to serve a couple of days in jail, or he could choose to do this 30 hours of community service. And this is a story that I've heard over and over again.
Service. These are very wrong information. The maximum community service you can do in community court is 8 hours. And Jules Epinard is here. They give us a letter. If it doesn't take anything, you can actually help people set up their bed at night at the shelter, and you will get community service done. So some of these stories is urban legend, and I don't know how to respond to that. But what I can tell you, Joanne, is that nobody is forced to do this. And we have never thrown people in jail because they didn't do community service. What we did is to extend it, opportunity to do it. We have never issued a warrant since March. In fact, long before.
I'm not talking about the last 6 months. I'm talking about before
Nobody
that.
has gone to jail on a community court charge. We release everybody that is in jail on community court case every day. So the fact that people don't show up for court, don't do this, don't do that, I can't help that. I don't make the law. The city made the law. So the people to talk to about the law, as long as they have the law on the book, my job is to make sure that I get my client out of jail. That is all my job, and to make sure that they are safe and they are secure and they have services provided to them. Some of the stories you hear sound like an urban legend that I cannot help.
But I've actually worked with people with my organization who had to serve 30 hours of community service, and I signed off on that. So I don't know where this 8-hour community service cap is coming from, but I've worked with multiple people who had 20 hours, 30 hours of community service that they were
The other court also ordered 30 hours of community court. Of community service. So people can go to court in community court, but they also have, the other judges also ordered that. It might not necessarily be a community court case. It might be a case that originated in another court where they send them to you to do community service. Okay, if somebody has 30 hours of community service that is in community court, it must have been an extra layer of refusal to do things over and over again. We've never had that. Jen can correct me if Jen is still on the line. We've never had that for years. I've never seen people ask to do 30 hours of community service in community court.
I personally, as an outreach worker and somebody who does see these folks regularly, I do ask that cases that are given to regular court be turned over to community court, because I know that the people experiencing homelessness who already have these charges, and these are charges that we cannot do anything about. That is the lawmakers of our community that make those laws. What I see in community court, and I used to be not a fan of community court. I used to see it in the way that Joan and Ken see it. Now participating in community court and being able to bring clients who already have existing charges that aren't going to be dismissed. They just aren't dismissed in our court system. At least they have the opportunity to come to a community court that recognizes their need for services, recognizes their disabilities and inabilities to pay fines or serve their time in jail. And if you look at the no public camping, there is jail time that can be given for those things. At least in community court, they're able to pay back fines or provide things that they can do, like community service or access to service. I know that one of the things that community court has provided for us as outreach is the ability to connect with the court system and keep people out of jail. We've been able to keep them from spending 30 days in jail or repeat offenders spending longer periods of time in jail. Instead, when they come to community court, they have service providers that follow them through their cycles of homelessness. I know that I participate in the fact that I can locate folks out in our area. When one of those folks doesn't show up for regular court, they get a warrant. For when they don't show up for community court, we go out and find them, find what the issue is that's causing them not to come to court, and address the charges that have already been given to them by somebody other than the court system.
Thank you, Jules. I believe that this is a conversation that needed to be had, and I appreciate you, Ken and Joanne, for the work that you do. But when you have questions, you have access to me, you have access to Jen, my colleague, and to Rick Wallis. Rick Wallis used to be the drug court public defender. We snatched him from the drug court to come and work in community court. Those are assets, those are people that genuinely believe in what they do, and they are doing their best to, and we have a prosecutor. Not anybody can serve in community court. Not every lawyer can do it. We are very deliberate on the people that we bring there. If you don't care about the homeless, you cannot work in our court. You have to have the heart for this work. And advocacy is part of our work. I fight every time to make sure that resources are provided to the homeless. I don't want to deal with cases one after the other, one by one. I did that for 17 years, and I was sick of it because, you know, I was representing the grandparent of the grandkids that was appearing before the court over and over again. Homeless, still homeless, and a cycle of poverty that needed to be broke. It cannot be fixed by locking people up. It has to be fixed by looking at the root cause of the problem. That's how I got into this. I was going to retire, I was going to resign and leave the justice system. But this gave me an opportunity to where my heart lies, to pursue where my heart lies. Yes, Ken?
I agree with you in that criminal laws cannot be addressed by attacking how we defend the people that are the subject, the prosecution, being prosecuted by criminal laws. So I'm not coming any further to you about the nature of what I believe is criminal laws. That I do believe judges can dismiss cases that have no merit. We have spitting laws on the books still all over the country in cities everywhere that aren't prosecuted. These are prosecuted. And these laws are about like spitting laws in terms of the sort of a legitimacy they have. If there are laws that target just men and women who we can only enforce these laws if there are enough shelter beds available. On its face, that is an unconstitutional law. That is a law that is targeting men and women who use shelter beds. And I'm not upset with you. I'm being emphatic because again, I do not want to say that the work you're doing representing people.
I get you, Ken. The Supreme Court has actually ruled, the United States Supreme Court ruled that you cannot find people guilty of sit and lie or trespass if there are no open bed. So one of the things that we look at in every police report is the officers have to write in there that there is an open shelter funded by the city before they can get a probable cause to file the charges. So these are something that they have to write in the report. Otherwise, we dismiss cases like that every day in community court.
It's easier.
Because they do not, if there are no open bed, you cannot proceed with the charge. So those are things that we as gatekeeper, we make sure that it doesn't get past us. So
it is hard to fight for the legitimate rights of men and women to be left alone, who are making choices that appear not in their own interest. And we want people to make decisions that are what we conceive to be in their interest. But if they wish to be left alone, that by itself is more challenging of a fight when what they've got is already pre-existing cases that they can win using argumentation like the Eighth Amendment.
Ken,
They come from now,
that
and
is-
that's Eighth Amendment.
that
The
is
protection
above-
of unreasonable, cruel and unusual punishment.
Ken, that is above my pay grade.
I understand.
And
Not mine.
let
I'm
me
a
say
citizen
something.
guy.
Look, the reason I came to Spokane is because I identify with the libertarian idea that the frontier mentality that government should leave me alone to do whatever I want to do.
Yes.
However, I don't pass the law. I think that is actually not within the province of the court of the law. That is something legislative advocacy would do. Because as long as the law is on the book, the court is mandated to enforce the law. If you don't want such laws to be on the book, then you go to the legislators, not to the judiciary. And so that last point is where I think we can both agree that the libertarian streak is something that we need to take to the city council or to the state legislator or to the Congress, that the government should leave us alone to live free and die, whichever way we want. If we want to live homeless, that is our choice. But as long as my client are still being cited, I will use everything within the confines of my ability to defend my client. I cannot
Thank you for your work.
Okay.
I thank you for your work, and I'm sure you represent your clients' interests well. And I'm sure that many appreciate the work you do on their behalf. I thank you. I wish I had an attorney that I could place such confidence as I have in you as to the work you do.
At the back of my office over there are the list of thank you card from people that I have represented. I'm very proud of the work that we do. I'm very proud of our team. I'm very proud of the city of Spokane that I live in, that give us opportunity to be able to fight for this issue. So I'm sure Barry is waiting to close this up. Thank you, Barry, for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you, Barry.
My pleasure. Anybody else got something they want to throw in there before we zoom off?
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Goodbye.
Francis.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you,
Julie. Bye,
Barry.
Ken. Bye, Joan. And anybody else who's there is probably going to zoom off, or they're just, wow.
Well, Francis already took off, but I did want to say that I actually am a fan of community court. I hope I didn't come off as not a fan of community court, especially the resource room. I worked at the library downtown for 34 years before I retired last year. That was my day job. And I saw folks come in every Monday, and there were some folks from my homeless outreach volunteer work that I actually advocated for in community court. I had a lot of experiences in community court advocating for people. And so I do appreciate community court. So I hope I didn't come across as, okay. I was just trying to lift up, this perspective that I'd heard from people on the street.
Yeah. Yeah, those things like that happen. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for being here, Joan. And
Thank you.
Zoom off.